DOS is not really a system you think of when talking about platformers. Amiga, NES, SNES or Sega Genesis are the ones that come to mind first. Maybe Commodore 64 or Sega Master System, but not DOS. It doesn't mean, however, that it didn't have any. In fact, it was one of the platforms that had them earliest, and also one that had the widest selection of often surprising in scope or quality freeware and shareware games. So, let's see what MobyGames users thought were the best platformers by year on DOS. There is no doubt in my mind that Janitor Joe was the very first DOS platformer. If there was one that came out earlier, make sure to let me know, I'd love to check it out. Still, our today's hero is not only all about keeping the hallways clean and trash cans empty. Oh no. He's also keen on completing increasingly more difficult stages. Because you're in control and you like the challenge. And also, cause you've no choice. Because all of the robots working on the space station that Joe's on went berserk. So, you have to complete all 5 stages by jumping around the platforms like crazy, collecting keys and avoiding robots, each guarding their own platforms as if there was no tomorrow. Beware though, as they're no Joe, and if they touch you, you die instantly. The other things that may kill you, because of course there are others, are the fall from great height and oxygen depletion. Oxygen, that's basically your level timer. When you complete all 5 stages, they loop back to the first and run again at an increased difficulty. There's no other way going around it. If you look at Janitor Joe's presentation, it's clear that it's beyond fugly. I mean, CGA usually looks either bad or terrible, but here, in this very early iteration, it's bad on another level. I mean, Janitor Joe looks like a failed attempt at an average 8-bit platformer that was started and then abandoned mid-development at an early alpha stage build. Clearly it's not the case here, but my point stays. Janitor Joe looks eerie appropriate for DOS. And while it may not ravish you with its gameplay loop or flashy graphics and melodic sounds, its historical significance is unquestionable. Caverns of Gink, that are one small letter away from having an awesome title of Caverns of Gunk, is another one of those very early DOS platformers and MobyGames user's choice for the best of 1985. Fear not, however, as you play as no other but smart, handsome and incredibly cool named Professor George Jumpalot. And you're on a quest searching through the caverns for a mythical legendary gold idol statue that was left there by Ginkans, an ancient tribe of deadly headhunters. Thing is, to find it you have to check all of the nooks and crannies in each of the caves. So you literally have to jump a lot, pun intended, on each and every of the platforms in each level. When you do, they change their color from red to brown to indicate where you've been to already. If you manage to visit them all, you move to the next stage. And guess what? Yep, you're completely right. Rinse and repeat. New stage, new platforms, new jumping bonanza. That said, it's not all about jumping only, as the infamous Ginkan headhunters are still out there, hiding in the shadows, prowling on the treasure hunters such as yourself. So, they constantly, time after time, without fail, every few seconds or so, send poisoned arrows your way. Naturally, you have to avoid this to survive, as one hit and the poisoned projectile will spread its toxic load, killing you in a second. So yeah, Caverns of Gink are as much about discovery as they are about survival. All that said, even though it dropped in 1985, Caverns of Gink don't look or play much better than earlier Janitor Joe did. So it's a bit disappointing. But the progress was definitely there, and our next game was a huge step forward in quality. And it's no other than Evil Demon King Astaroth has kidnapped your beloved princess, and you, playing as the brave, courageous, insanely good-looking and party-loving Knight Arthur, must head off after Astaroth, battling through hundreds upon hundreds of his mostly undead minions to find and save your love from his slimy clutches. Now you, being you, so a master gamer, will no doubt do it all with ease, but you must also remember that Ghosts and Goblins is not only about fighting and princess saving, though that's a big part of it, but also about platforming, and you'll do a lot of it. Making daredevil-worthy jumps, perhaps not as many as Jumpalot did, but a lot nonetheless. You'll use moving platforms and ladders all over, getting closer and closer to the big bad, and avoiding hazards of various kind, sharp, wet and hot. Now, that sounds like an introduction to an adult movie and not a game, but you get what I mean. Guillotines, water and fire, among others. Same can be said about enemies. They're everywhere, they're like literally spawn into existence out of nowhere, often digging their way up from the underworld, and you'll need to dispose of them all, or they will of you. Anyway, like I said, Ghosts and Goblins is an arcade action platformer in which you're traveling through 6 large, mostly right or upward scrolling levels trying to achieve your noble goal. And for whatever the reason, you only have 3 minutes per stage. So, 3 minutes times 6 gives us 18 minutes to complete the entire game. Not much, right? Wrong. Chances that you finish it in one go within allotted time are very, very low. Unless you grew up playing it in the arcades, that is, then only low. So you'll go through the village, mountain and caverns, with each next stage being more demanding than the previous one was. Kinda, but I won't get into details now, so let's assume that the further you go, the tougher it will be. Unfortunately, you're not defenseless on this quest, and are armed with a magical lance that you happily toss left and right, annihilating anything in your way. Why is it magical? Well, you can throw it countless times, never witness it return to you in any way, and yet still have it available to be thrown at a moment's notice. Naturally, there are a few different weapons to find and pick up, and even an armor that serves as an extra life, falling off of you when you get hit and saving you from insta-dying. Ghosts and Goblins, despite being incredibly difficult, is also really addictive. And while you may get annoyed with it all the freaking time dying all over the place, for many reasons, you still won't be able to put it away, craving more and more and more. It's an easy win for 1986. While original Lode Runner is not as good as released few years later 1994 Lode Runner The Legend Returns, it's still hella addictive and genius in its simplicity. Each level is a small platforming puzzle to solve, and your aim is to collect all the gold on it, avoiding death in the form of your loyal yet crazy fans, chasing you constantly trying to get your autograph. Now, perhaps they were not meant to be fans in the first draft of the game, but when I look at them now, judge how they behave and how unrelentingly they follow your every step, I have to assume that they actually are. Fanatical fans, that is. And these are dangerous. But if you manage to collect all the gold and avoid premature death, the exit will open somewhere on the level and you'll be able to go through to the next stage. Luckily, you're not helpless in your struggle against the blinded by love for you sims, and you can spawn pits on your left and right, and they serve either as means of traversal between the levels, meaning you can jump down through them, or as traps. Pits seal themselves automatically after a few seconds, regardless if there's something in them or not. So mastering the use of them is a key to success and your best and only weapon in the game. Captured and crushed in them bodies are not removed from the level though, their love for you knows no bounds after all, and they respawn far off just to keep chasing you again. Forever and ever. Well, or until you turn the game off. That works too. Lode Runner, while mechanically simple, is surprisingly fun and engaging experience, especially given how absolutely awful its CGI presentation and PC speaker sounds are. Bobble is one of the very best single-screen platformers ever made. Easily top 5. I dare you to name 5 better. PC DOS port is not an exception. Bobble is a story of, believe it or not, two people, Bob and Bob. Their parents weren't wasting time picking the names, it seems. And they wandered into the mysterious cave full of monsters and got magically turned into dinosaurs. Things like that happen only in Japan. Or heads of mental patients in locked-off worlds. One of the two. Or so I heard. Irrelevant silly story aside, each level is a single screen built out of platforms and filled with enemy monsters. And to progress to the next, you have to clear the one you're in, defeating all of the cutesy creatures. One way or another, and the easiest of them is to do so by blowing bubbles at them. Yeah, literally. They are trapped in them, and all you gotta do is jump on the bubbles to pop them, and anything trapped inside will cease to exist. I once put hate, racism and inequality in a bubble myself, but then had to get the door as someone was knocking, and when I got back, the bubble was gone. And the world is the way it is ever since. My fault. Whenever bubbles are floating and have no enemies inside them, they can be used as mobile platforms, greatly expanding your options for traversal. Bobble is an amazing game, an even better one when played with a friend. So, if you enjoy unique, as fun alone as they are with someone else platformers, you can hardly get any better, and definitely couldn't buy 1988. Do you believe in premonitions and people capable of foretelling the future? Can you imagine someone predicting something happening and then putting it in a book, movie or a video game? Well, Strider is a side-view action platformer, and it tells the story of 2048's single country's evil grandmaster that wants to take over the universe. For himself only. Yes, you heard that right. Not continent, not planet, a universe. Ambitious fellow, that one. And his name is No, let me think about it. I know, his name is Mayo. Not like the condiment though, but M-E-I-O. Sounds kinda Far Eastern really, Japanese maybe. It sounds like a name for a fairy to be honest. Oh well, let's carry on. You're Hiryu, Super A-Class Strider, whatever that means. Oh no, wait, I know what that means. It means that whenever you enter any room, you're instantly the most dangerous, deadliest and smartest person in it. You're that good. And so you're the only one to find and defeat Mayo. So you'll have to fight your way through 5 rather large levels crawling with bodies, mid and end level bosses. And you're armed with your plasma sword alone. Not that you need anything else, but that's what they sent you there with. Straight into the hornet's nest. Strider is an action platformer and a conversion from the arcades, and there wouldn't be anything special about it if not for the aforementioned sword and the fact that you can basically climb most walls and overhangs, which is something that no other platformer at the time did. Not many scenes either, but that's beside the point. Strider in the arcades is excellent, home conversions vary in terms of quality and content, but this DOS version was a clear MobyGames user's pick for 1989. Personally, I would have went for Rick Dangerous, but you know, not my circus, not my animals. And we're finally getting into AAA stuff. Everyone knows Prince of Persia. At least every gamer should. Not only on PC, but as a title in history of gaming. Because if you don't and claim to be a true gamer, a gigachat or a hackerman, then clearly you're lying. At least about one of the three. I mean, it's like not knowing of pizza and claiming to be a foodie. Sure, it's not a delicacy, but a comfort food it most definitely is. Anyway, for those who for whatever the reason haven't heard of Prince of Persia, I'm happy to explain. When Sultan left the country to fight a war abroad, Grand Vizier Jafar orchestrated coup d'etat and took over the country by force. To solidify his rule, however, he aims to marry Sultan's daughter. Against her will, naturally. You know, how they used to back in the day. To make sure that the marriage will go uninterrupted, Jafar threw her loved one in the dungeon under the palace and kept him locked off. The wedding is in 1 hour on the dot and you play as said young man. I mean, who else would you be? And you have to not only escape the dungeon and get through Jafar and his countless goons to save your beloved, but also do it all in a allotted time limit. And you won't. And you'll fail. And that's a big one. You won't mind it at all. And will keep trying time after time. Because Prince of Persia definitely deserves its spot on this list. On your way, other than the baddies, you'll need to avoid series of various deadly traps, and you can expect them to be anything anywhere. So great heights you can fall from, collapsing platforms, spike traps, guillotine-like steel plates cutting anything going through them in half, and many more. Prince of Persia is a 2D platformer, a progenitor of the cinematic platformer genre, and a game that places more emphasis on careful and accurate platforming than on running and completing it ASAP. And yes, I say it despite the 1 hour timer constantly ticking away when you're playing. The stages are rather complex, vast and multi-leveled, and teach you with their excellent design that sometimes, not always, but sometimes, slower is actually faster. I remember finding this approach confusing at first, and then when I got used to it, very refreshing and fun. Prince of Persia stole hearts of many with its unique level design, gripping puzzling, pixel-perfect platforming and fights. It was, after all, the first and undisputed king of rotoscoped animation, making it look more fluid and lifelike than any other game had been before. Oddworld, aka Out of This World, is a near perfect game. It's a cinematic arcade adventure platformer with incredible atmosphere and fantastic sci-fi setting. Let the best testament to that be the fact that the outstanding introduction explaining the origin of the story and setting up the plot to follow seamlessly transforms into gameplay. And if you're not careful, and a first-time Oddworld player, you may actually die when starting up, as you'd never know that the animation ended and that you're in fact in control already. There's just no better way to immerse the player than by completely removing the noticeable border between the cinematics and gameplay, especially when said gameplay is perfectly crafted. The entire adventure you'll depart on is incredibly smooth and fluid moving action platformer that feels like an animated movie that you're a part of. A dark dystopian sci-fi movie perhaps, but one nonetheless. Oddworld is not just the presentation though, and even though the graphics are excellent for the time it released in, it is first and foremost a fantastic story that has the beginning, middle and end. And its plot will leave you feeling as if you took an active part in it and influenced its outcome with your actions and choices. And I say that knowing very well that it's as linear as any other platformer, perhaps even more so, taking you from point to point and letting you experience everything it has to offer on the way. That entirely imaginary but perfectly crafted feeling of freedom aside, the game's extremely difficult, with literally any damage to your character nearly always ending up being a fatal one. Now, normally I'd despise games for cheap deaths and allowing those deaths to be incredibly easy to fall a victim to, but I don't get that with Oddworld. It built its virtual world with such an attention to detail, such sophistication, and enveloped it all in a captivating and, frankly speaking, honestly unnecessary for a platformer story that I just can't help myself but love it. Despite the difficulty, despite the devs, despite everything. Oddworld is not a game, it's an experience, an absolute gaming classic and easily the best DOS platformer of 1991. Story-wise, since I failed to even mention it so far, you're a young physicist Lester, and during a particle experiment, you're mysteriously transported into an alien world. All because of the lightning struck nearby and your machinery's malfunction. And now, against all odds, you must find your way home. Magic Pockets is an unusual title for me. For the longest time I thought it was Amiga exclusive, then years later I learned that it originally actually released on Atari ST, and then, even later on, that it had couple different ports too, one of them being DOS. So most that I thought I knew about it for years was completely wrong. Fortunately, all of it was largely irrelevant. So, Magic Pockets is a 2D side view action platformer. It places you in the shoes of the so-called bitmap kid, who has to travel through 4 worlds of 4 areas each to recover his toys that had been stolen. All of these worlds, so cave, jungle, lake and mountain, are entirely unique to one another, but more than in most other games. Because not only their presentation changes, but also enemies, pickups and even the weapons that you use. If you can even call them that, as you sorta summon them from your bottomless pocket. And no, that's not just phrasing. Your pockets, as the title clearly states, are magical and bottomless. That second part is implied. So, in the first world, your weapon are tornadoes that you throw out of said pocket, in second clouds, in third ice cubes and in the last snowballs. Interestingly enough, all this can also be used to solve simple environmental puzzles you'll come across, and not only as means of distraction. Every weapon can be charged up by holding the button and then they are released at an increased size and power. Other than this, you will occasionally find a fireball or spiky weapon, but these have to be tracked down and aren't available at all times. There's also a bubblegum pickup allowing you to glide and TV that when interacted with reveals all enemies on the level. Most worlds also have special areas that change the gameplay mechanics a little to keep the game fresh all throughout. And these can be various odd things like riding a bike, swimming and few others. And while they're not necessary in this already fun game, they make it even better. Magic Pockets is really good, and while it may not be my favorite platformer, MobyGames users thought it was theirs. Well, at least for 1992. I'm not sure if it was the same everywhere, but where I grew up, there was a common urban myth that Flashback was a sequel to Another World, which, as we very well know today, is not the case. Sure, both games have the same developer, similarly fluid moving protagonists, numerous animated sequences and incredible intros. But that's about it. Other than that, there are separate entities. Flashback is a cinematic action platformer set in futuristic, often cyberpunkish feeling environments, and it's best known for its atmosphere and lifelike character animations. It didn't hurt that it plays pretty good either. The year is 2142 and you're Conrad B. Hart, and while you've barely managed to escape from hostile aliens, they shot you down and inevitably you crash-landed on an unknown planet with amnesia being the only thing you're sure of. From then onward, your quest to restore your memories, regain your identity and come back home begins. The level's design is definitely Flashback's most prominent feature. All the enemies' placement and environmental puzzles require careful route planning and most importantly strategic approach, but some allow few possible ways of solving them, literally by taking different paths or order of actions. So, it's a thinking man's platformer. Running in willy-nilly guns blazing rarely ends up being successful, outside of first couple of levels maybe. And even then, it's a risky and silly tactic. As compared to Another World, Flashback focuses more on platforming and exploration rather than linear storytelling. And while its plot is fantastic too, it gives you a lot of freedom, many paths to investigate and some pretty fun puzzles to beat. Flashback is a timeless classic that was ported to nearly all systems of its time and it's as good today as it was decades ago and an unquestionable best DOS platformer of the year. Oh, and there was a modern remake of it few years back and it's decent too. Because of how fast he moves and how quickly he gains momentum, Jackrabbit is often wrongly compared to Sonic the Hedgehog. But in reality, apart from the speed they both achieve, they have nothing in common. And good, because while this may sound a bit controversial, I prefer Jackrabbit to Sonic games. They're just more varied and exploration-friendly in their design. Anyway, Jackrabbit is an action platformer where you're a, well, rabbit named Jazz and armed with a blaster. Sounds cool, right? You like the Terminator of the vegetable garden, disposing of tons of enemies in a very colorful and attractively designed levels and spreading albibugs left and right. Along the way you'll collect various power-ups and weapon upgrades as each consecutive level is more and more demanding and you will definitely need that extra oomph to progress further. Oh, and did I mention bonus levels that play entirely in 3D? I didn't? Oh well, they do, and you race headlong through a racetrack in them, amassing points in a given time limit. It's not a necessary addition to this already fun package, but definitely a fresh feeling palate cleaner between standard Metroidvania platforming fare. Jazz is beautiful, full of charming looking and smoothly animated characters and beautiful lush backgrounds thematically unique to all of the worlds that the game is divided into. Honestly, other than Super Frog and Fury of the Fairies, which are just groundbreaking and there's no competition to them really, Jackrabbit is absolutely the best action platformer DOS had in the first half of the 90s, and every fan of the genre should check it out. Now, you may wonder why Jazz is here and neither Super Frog nor Fury of the Fairies are. Well, not my list, not my picks I'm afraid, and you've MobyGames to blame for that. Rayman is a proof that DOS could pull off platformers as good, if not better than those found on consoles. Running super smoothly encompassed in rich, colorful backgrounds and melodic music, with excellent sounds and intricate, perfectly thought-out level design. And all that with ease and not too demanding on the hardware. In fact, when it comes to 2D platformers, Rayman is probably the most technically and graphically sophisticated one of 1995. And I don't just mean on PC. At the time, the only other platform that got the port of it was the infamous short-lived Atari Jaguar. Infamous for not understanding math and how the bits work, at least for the purpose of their commercials. But quite fun, if a bit underappreciated otherwise system. Rayman is a story of your classic good versus evil, so Rayman versus Mr. Dark respectively, and it's an action platformer featuring our unusual hero, one that does not have arms or legs, but has hands and feet despite that. How are they connected to his body? No one knows, but my best bet is on hopes and dreams. Aside from standard running and jumping found in other platformers, Rayman can also hover for a short while using his hair as a propeller and throw his fists in an attack. And yes, I meant what I said, throw. They can be one-upped too for a more powerful punch, like a knockout strong one. In the end, Rayman is the best of the best the system could do when it came to action platforming, and an incredibly fun and easy to pick up title that I believe everyone should try, as it's the best example of what DOS was capable if given a chance and some talent thrown at it. Leo the Lion by Lyrics Longsoft and published by CD Projekt, now of Witcher and Cyberpunk 2077 fame, is a Polish cartoony action-adventure platformer. Your task, playing as titular skinny Leo the Lion, is to recover crown that was stolen from you. To do so, you'll have to travel through 4 islands of 3 stages each, so overall at 12 beautiful lush levels covering areas like swamps, magic castle or a pyramid to name a few, all within the so-called Lion Archipelago. And you'll also be fighting off bodies big and small, collecting and using various objects and solving puzzles. Items like machete, coconut, stick, flyswat or snowpeak will all have certain usage scenarios marked with appropriate icons. Leo the Lion's graphics are fantastic, which is both good and bad. It's great because the game looks excellent, like a real-life cartoon that you can take active part in, and have the character and his surroundings respond to your controls. And bad because while all the enemies are nicely animated and large, with a lot of detail to them, it makes difficult to gauge by eye where the collision boxes borders are and can lead to uncomfortable situations while playing. Leo the Lion was marketed towards younger audiences, which was a mistake on CD Projekt's side, as some of its puzzles and levels are designed in a rather challenging manner and maybe just a bit too difficult for the young ones. Interestingly enough, when Leo the Lion came out, it sold only 10,000 copies, which is a terrible result. In the same time though, it's estimated that close to 150,000 illegal copies were circling around back then, most of them in Poland. Few years after its release, piracy would mostly die off in the country, but in 1996 it was one of the reasons why it failed to gain any real traction. Leo's abroad reception was rather cold, and it never reached respectable sales there either. It's a fun, if a bit underrated game that definitely deserves another chance. When our protagonist Abe overhears that his race of Madcons that's been enslaved by the evil Glacons to work in their huge corporations is actually delicacy, a source of incredibly tasty and popular meat for the oppressing Glacons, he decides to run away and save as many of his brethren as possible, whatever the means necessary. He tried interpretative dancing, he tried flash mobs, which is not that easy to pull off if you're on your own, and he even tried gardening. None of it was good enough to save his race. So finally, he went into puzzle platforming. And Oddworld Abe's Oddysee is just that, an excellent example of the genre. It was also very popular back in the day, especially on Sony PlayStation, mainly for sporting A-class presentation, interesting gameplay mechanics and a very well thought out mixture of puzzling and quick-time arcade elements. It's also a game that I never liked, and regardless of how many times I tried making myself get into it, I always somehow failed. It's just not for me and I can't tell why. Perhaps because it's so unforgiving that it feels like these modern Souls-like games do, and they represent another genre I despise for being more frustrating than rewarding. Or perhaps something else. I will never know, as I will never try it out again. But generally speaking, I'm in a very, very tiny vocal minority, and most critics and gamers of the time loved it, found it enchanting and challenging just enough to keep them entertained, but not enough to cause anger and annoyance. So, if you're not an avid hater of Souls games and enjoy puzzle platformers, perhaps Oddworld is something you'll actually fall for, which I wish upon you, as it will get no love from me. Sint Nicolaas, yes, Sint, is an arcade platformer and 1998's best game in the genre for DOS. According to you. Yes, you. Well, maybe not you, but you as in World of Gamers you, as seen on MobyGames website, but you get what I mean, right? Now, you may wonder why you've never heard of it if it's so good. Well, it's elementary, my dear Watson. Sint Nicolaas is one of the thousands of freeware games that graced the platform and never had any real form of advertisement other than the very limited word of mouth. And it's a pity, as it's rather fun, especially for an entirely free title. You play as Sint Nicolaas, and you've been robbed. I know, how could they? I mean, how dare they? You may be a bit differently named than most would expect, probably for copyright or legal reasons, but it doesn't change the fact that you're out there, grinding, giving your best, spreading gifts and love before Christmas, all around. Hold on a sec, it suddenly sounds awful. I mean, if you think about it, like really think about it, do you want an old grey-bearded man to come to your house at night, silently like a ninja, through the chimney no less, and then seduce your kids with gifts and sweets? Hell no. But that's Santa Claus. Sint Nicolaas wouldn't do that, would he? He's one of the good ones after all, right? Anyway, as I was saying, your sack full of presents and gingerbread cookies has been stolen, and you must recover them all to save Christmas. Or Sintmas, whatever he's representing. Fortunately, the thieves were a rather clumsy bunch, probably drunk on eggnog and high on chimney fumes, and they've dropped the gifts and cookies everywhere. So, all you really have to do now is go around, pick them up and bring them to the right chimneys. So you'll be jumping around the rooftops, collecting dropped gifts, avoiding birds, TV antennas and the likes, bringing gifts to identically colored chimneys and dropping as many cookies in them as the number on them indicates. I know, crazy. If I knew that it works like that, I would have long time ago written 2 million on my chimney and started the cookie selling business straight after. But perhaps it's different with Santa and he doesn't read those numbers and it wouldn't have changed anything. Maybe they're only for Sint Nicolaas. We'll never know. After each level is done, there's a bonus round that's you trying to pick up to 100 gingerbread cookies within a time limit. Platforms in them disappear though, so you have to approach them smartly. Sint Nicolaas may not be the best looking, sounding or even playing game out there, but for an entirely free effort, it's really decent and a good choice for 1998, when not many games released on DOS anymore. Mr. Tomato is an enhanced port of 1995's Amiga's game of the same title. Story-wise, you're a young kid who fell asleep one evening while reading his favorite comic book. You know, as kids used to when the internet was not as easily accessible. And as he was about to wake up, he was pulled into the comic book world through its pages and trapped there. So you now have to try to escape and come back to the real world. Also, if I may suggest something, never read comic books at night. Clearly, nothing good ever comes out of it. Mr. Tomato is a side-scrolling, or right-scrolling I should say really, as you can't really turn back, action platformer and sees you going through series of levels to get back to reality. As you go about it, you collect diamonds and coins. Grabbing 33 diamonds allows you to move to the next stage, and every 5 coins you get extra energy. Naturally, if Mr. Tomato was just about happily jumping around and collecting pickups, it would be an incredible easy and even more so boring game. So there are enemies everywhere, and they're all out to get you. Now, I make it sound menacing, and they're really not that terrible, but they do get in a way, so it's best to dispose of them early. You can do it by throwing titular tomatoes at them. Why do you carry so many of these? Hard to tell, but it's good that you have them. If you collect 20 coins, they can be exchanged for a rifle too, and a rifle is a true tool of destruction and a much needed upgrade. All in all, the game is composed out of 3 overworlds of 5 stages each, and one last final single stage that takes place inside the computer, and you'll face the enemies there that you had previously all throughout your adventure. Graphics, sounds and animations are all rather nice, perhaps not 1999 nice, but nice nonetheless, and overall Mr. Tomato is quite fun, even if clearly directed at a younger audience. If you get a chance, check it out, as there had to be a reason why it was picked as the best DOS platformer of 1999 by the users of the biggest retro gaming website in the world, right? You know what's most interesting about it though? I know for a fact that Mr. Tomato released in 1997 on PC, and yet MobyGames placed it in the 1999 bracket, and that's where it took the cake. It's all kinds of odd, but I'm not one to question millions of gamers here, preaching my rights to their wrongs. Happyland Adventures is a cutesy fantasy side-scrolling platformer in which you play as a small dog that has to gather and save all the lost colorful animals and then lead them to the so-called happy zones. Animal heaven gateways perhaps, or the farm that so many of us were told about when our pets passed away. Neither, I think, as the animals seem to be in a tip-top shape. Once you manage to save enough of them and deliver to those happy zones, you're free to move to the next stage. Not many people know this, but this little gem of a game was created as a freeware entry for the Game Dev contest, and then easily won it. Unsurprisingly so, as behind the over-the-top sweet graphics lies hell of a game. Something that many would willingly pay for given its quality. There are obviously numerous pickups other than the animals that supplement your score and enable extra abilities for our little dog. And what feels like hundreds of hidden locations full of gems and fruit to gather. The final version of the game included earlier standalone Xmas expansion and the level editor, addition of which spawned numerous user-created levels that extended the life of this amazing platformer considerably. My first experience with Happyland Adventures was when I was at uni studying to become IT technician/teacher. And believe it or not, I had to spend some time teaching IT in primary and secondary schools to gain extra credit and necessary experience. And I happened to end up in the school that my younger sister was a student of. Well, I aimed to get there. Chances were slim, but stars aligned correctly. No wars started that year and I landed where I was supposed to. And everyone in her class played Happyland. Every second they got free, as if they were possessed by it. At first, I disregarded it as a game for kids. After all, it was not played from the first-person perspective, there were no guns and no cities or nations to manage within whatsoever, so it was definitely not a title for me. Or so I thought. But then, I gave it a go one of those days, and I was instantly hooked. It's easily one of the best PC platformers of the late DOS era, and one you should do yourself a favor and try out. And no, I'm not a teacher anymore. Charlie 2 is a follow-up to 1996's Charlie the Duck and a pretty fun original always scrolling shareware DOS platformer. I mean, what else would it be in a video about best DOS platformers? Anyway, once again, you're Charlie, intelligent duck, future avian overlord that has to go through 18 level strong game, collecting certain number of treasures in each to progress. So, depending on the difficulty level that you choose, you have to grab a specific percentage of coins and diamonds in each stage. For easy, it's 55%, for normal 65%, and for hard 75%. Now, 75 doesn't sound that bad now, does it? I mean, it's only 10 more than normal. You should be able to pull it off, right? Well, yes and no. While it's not difficult to find those per se, some are hidden and you'll need to perform a thorough duckvestigation to find them all. And if you wonder what the hell duckvestigation is, it's an investigation performed by an intelligent duck. I thought it was duckvious really. Yes, obvious, but when you're a duck. Anyway, I'm drowning in a sea of cringe here. Collecting coins and diamonds is not all, as the levels are swarming with enemies. Nope, no, I'm lying. Again, sorry. There are enemies in Charlie 2, no doubt about that, but swarming, they are definitely not. Now, you've no weapon to shoot them, but following the Mario-established classic martial arts move consisting of jumping on their heads with all your avian weight, works just fine. As most good platformers go, Charlie 2 also features hidden levels, a lot of platforming consisting of utilizing moving platforms, trampolines, disappearing blocks and destructible crates, and avoiding traps, spikes and the likes. You won't get bored in it is what I'm saying. Especially that I'd risk saying that its level design and gameplay loop could rival that of Mario games. Every 6 levels you get a boss, or the boss gets you depending how agile you are, and there are a nice change of pace too, keeping Charlie 2 fresh all throughout its run. Oh, and I failed to mention it before, but you should always avoid these spikes. For the love of God, avoid the spikes, man. They're an insta-death. Graphics, sounds and stage design of Charlie 2 is excellent, and even though it released very late in 2001, basically years after DOS ceased being a viable gaming platform, it's still worth a look and playthrough, as it's hella fun. What do you think of MobyGames user picks for best platformers? They look decent to me, though I would personally prefer Brick Dangerous to take the cake for 1989 rather than Strider, but it's not my list, so it is what it is. Would you like to see any changes to it though? Let me know in the comments below. If you like the video, hit those like and subscribe buttons below. Smash them if you have to, it helps more than you could ever know. Also, I would like to thank you and all my amazing Patreon and YouTube members for helping this channel keep going. And last but definitely not least, I would like to thank all the wonderful folks who record and upload playthroughs, let's plays and other retro-centric videos here on YouTube, because they help to preserve the games that would have otherwise been long forgotten. So thank you.